Their thing is the biggest employers on their stage. I wonder what happens if that's.
Are you going ahead with this? No exemptions?
I said no exemption to that. Start thinking.
Okay, you guessed right. So I don't have to introduce Olaf that much. And because you've already seen his videos, you've already given me the takeaways and all the questions. And I know there are about 3 questions for most of you, from most of you. I'd like you to just limit yourself to 1 question per person, and we'll see how we go until about 7 o'clock. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
All right, okay. And then we'll see. But Faris, 1. Jon, 1. All right.
Good. Yeah, very good. Yeah, thank you. So, I think that's good. Can everybody hear me? Clearly?
Yes.
All right, good.
Is this all right, Harry? Like that?
Yep.
So, good evening. Thanks for having me. It's a delight to be working with yourselves and with Professor Norma Harrison. I assume you've all seen the video, and I'm here for questions. This is what I enjoy doing. So, looking forward to having some debate with you. Norma asked me to do a little bit of a recap or presentation. I'm happy to do that. I'm not going to show more slides because I think we're all PowerPointed out these days. But I look forward to discussing the topic with you. I think that navigating future innovative technologies and methodologies in operations management is very relevant these days. We're seeing a lot of digital disruption. We're seeing a lot of acceleration of new business models, of new technologies that are making whole industries obsolete overnight, but are also creating new industries as we speak. This other term that you've probably heard me talk about, which is industrial consumerism. And I think this is probably one of the big changes that a lot of companies are not fully grasping yet. But it's all about the experience. It's not about the product. I remember, 10, 15, 20 years ago when a new piece of equipment came out and you were so excited to get it, and then you had to go to some store and it wasn't available, and you had to go to another store and then you bought it and you brought it home, and then there was a 70-page manual that you had to go through to actually understand it, and you turn it on and make it happen, and it wouldn't work, and you couldn't call anybody to help you out with it, and it sort of was what you were used to. It's what you put up with. But nobody puts up with that anymore these days. People want this thing to be very easy to research. So from my initial discovery as a consumer, I want to make sure that I completely have visibility over what is this going to deliver for me. How do I acquire it? It's got to be really easy. I want it delivered to me anytime, any place, anywhere. I want not to pay a lot of money for that convenience. And then I want it to work. I don't want to read through all these difficult manuals. It just has to work. It has to be easy to consume. And it has to interact with the ecosystem of my, digital home that is already having a lot of devices connected to it. And I'm just taking an example now, let's say, of an electronics device. But I think that whole expectation of consumers is just growing and it will continue to grow much more rapidly. And from our research, we know that the younger the generation is, the more instant they want these things to happen. And a lot of companies are still, I think, still have the focus on the product, and they believe that if they have the right product, that they will be able to differentiate. But it's no longer about the product in itself. It is really about the experience that you can offer. So that is another big one. The other one is obviously sustainability. And with sustainability, I don't mean just recycling and green. I also mean the way that consumers trust the organizations and want that they buy from and want them to have responsible methods for getting and making products and sending it to them. They want to trust them, that they're not underexploiting certain parties in the process. They want to trust them to be able to do business with and give them their data, right? Because we're giving companies a lot of data and we want them to use it in a way that we feel we're not going to get taken advantage of. And so this whole sustainability aspect is increasingly important to consumers and also transparent, right? Because one tweet from somebody with a lot of followers and everybody will know about what a particular organization did or did not do. I think this whole concept of the differences in the generations that is obviously bringing out a lot of this change very quickly. The younger sort of digital native folks have very different expectations in the way that they interact with organizations and consume information and products. And then we have also a massive shift globally in terms of urbanization, right? Mega cities are being created. There's a continuous exodus of the country and people moving in. Although reading the Sydney Morning Herald here and the local media, it says people are escaping the city, but that would be quite the trend. I'm sure there are some established people leaving the city, but ultimately the city keeps growing, right? And that's a trend that we see worldwide. So a lot of these factors, I think, are causing a lot of pressure on organizations. And what we say is there's not the fifth industrial revolution. This is what we call Industry X.0. And why do we call it X.0 is because we think it will continue to revolutionize itself rapidly. And the speed at which this is happening is just being exacerbated, right? We won't see 20, 30, 40 years until the next revolution. Because of digital, the way that companies interact now with the consumers and actually are able to provide mass customization to a level that we have not been able to do before at a cost that is actually economically viable, because we've always been able to customize in the past, but it has always come at the expense of, I've worked with companies, all my life where we've cut out, products because we showed them that they were losing so much money on these, very specific products that we just cut them out and say, well, it might be nice to have, but we're not making any money with it. So we were cutting them out. Now I'm working with companies to put them back in because digital is now allowing organizations to do it in a cost-efficient way because of the integration between engineering, product development, and manufacturing with things like 3D printing. It is possible now to have mass customized products, right? And so at a cost that is economically viable. So I think those are some of the things that are happening. And as I mentioned earlier, the focus on just products and making superior products is no longer a viable proposition. And the difference with X.O is that the best companies out there that are working in this space are using all these digital technologies, not just to transform the core, as we call it, the core operations and the core business, and make that efficient to a level that hasn't been possible before, but they're also using it to create the new products and services in an ecosystem that they didn't have possible before. And this is the new place, the new value propositions, the mass customization at a level of cost efficiency that wasn't possible before. So, make sense? Do you have similar views, or do you have different views? I'm very happy to engage in the discussion. As I said, I've been told you've all seen the video, so I'm happy to open it up from here for discussion and use the time like that.
All right, so this is your chance. Would you like to ask any questions? Yes, and can you please start off by stating your name?
My name is Swami Chakravarti, and
Yeah, that might be good, Tim.
my name is Swami Chakravarti, and my question is about mass customization. And for mass customization, we need data,
Yes.
which and most of the data which comes out will have some of us will have some issues with the privacy policies.
Yeah.
So how do we balance that in terms of mass customization, because it is very needed in today's world, whereas also privacy of data too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very, very valid point. Cybersecurity is something that is going to explode, right? If you think about the amount of devices that are now connected, right, to the internet through IoT, and how that's going to change. Now, the predictions of that are wildly varying, from 25 billion devices being connected in the next 10 years to 50 billion devices being connected in the next 10 years. Now, I've gone back and had a look at that. Historically, all these predictions have always been wrong, at least by half. So even if I take the most optimistic one now and say 50 billion, it's probably going to be 100 billion, right? So we don't know. But I guess what I'm getting at is this is going to create serious implications for cybersecurity, right? And so that industry is really going to get amped up over the next few years, and using artificial intelligence, using deep learning to be able to manage. And this comes back to my point around sustainability earlier on, and trust. If I am, and especially in the medical world, right, if I'm going to entrust you with my data to get a better service from you, I want to have absolute guarantee that you're not going to let me down, right? But that could even be as simple as, trusting my provider to handle my credit card data at the moment, right? There's enough evidence of that already going wrong. So I think this is a very, very important aspect, and industry will have to make sure that it beefs up its cybersecurity capability ahead of its interaction with consumers and obtaining their data, because otherwise, it won't happen. But yeah, absolutely.
Just a follow-up question on that, Bjorn Lindberg. Do you think the companies are actually willing to take that massive amount of cost that it is to do cybersecurity at this point in time?
Yes.
Seeing as it's changing all the time, so it's not just a one-time investment, but also follow-up investments that we're already seeing banks do it, but they're saying, oh, this will cost us $2 billion when it's at the end it's $6 billion.
Yeah.
Do you think everybody's willing to take, or does everybody have the ability to actually take on those, or is it just going to leave the big players left?
No, I'm not here to make a prediction about the nature of the cybersecurity industry. I simply don't know. But what I do know is that consumer demand is ahead of the capabilities in many aspects, and that many nimble companies are entering the market and creating new services and new products for consumers that they want over the existing, old school providers. So this creates a pool, for cybersecurity to catch up and deliver that, right? Because then what you see, you get small digital natives coming in and making a huge change in the industry and disrupting it, and all of a sudden the big players will have to follow, or they'll be eradicated, and they'll put the money behind cybersecurity as well, absolutely. But it's a huge topic. It's growing very rapidly, and it will continue to be, something that companies will need to focus on more and more as, they have more access to data and connected devices and risks associated with it.
Do you have last mic?
Hi, it's Kimberly from AMP. I just have a question in relation to financial services, and particularly insurance companies and adapting to X.0. I look at our systems and you'd probably be surprised to note that the back end for our systems in a lot of the cases is DOS-based, so we haven't moved at all.
Core banking.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see how the companies that are so traditional, operating such old, established B2B business models, how do you see them adapting without being eclipsed, noting it is a highly regulatory environment?
Yeah. It's a good question, and certainly the financial services industry is particularly vulnerable to digital. Right? I mean, it's not my particular area of expertise. I work across many different industries. Financial services not that much, but what we're certainly seeing is the banking game becoming an IT game. Right, because we're all moving away from branches. I mean, just a question, who's been to a bank branch here in the last year? One? Mm-hmm. Okay, it's like 4% out of the roof. And it's probably because you had to sign some documents for a mortgage or something like that, right, where they want you to verify. But that's all going to go away. So this whole banking and insurance game, and insurance is even worse because the amount of information that they're going to have available through the IoT, you'll be paying policy for your car depending upon how fast you drive. You know what I mean? Because they can actually see what you're doing, or ultimately in the future, have sensors about your body and how much, now already with your smartphone, right there. If you submit your data to your insurance provider and you show that you're running regularly and you're having a healthy lifestyle, you're already getting better. So I think a lot of that is going to massively change that industry, and we see that now with the nimble digital startups that are coming in. Having some serious threat to the existing players, and the way to do it is to make what we call the wise pivot. So how do these existing financial institutions invest wisely into new products, offerings, and services that don't eradicate necessarily what they're doing right now? So it's investing into the core and making that more efficient and better and lower cost. But at the same time, it's investing into the future for the new services and products. And they could be completely different digital platforms, right? Because that is what we often see companies mistake, is that they believe they have to throw the baby out in the bathwater, so to speak. But you don't need to do that, because it will take you too long. It will simply take you too long. So you've got to have that two-speed IT that allows you to build quickly on top of existing. Yeah. Does that sort of help? Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah, Johnson from Finisar Corporation. Similar to what Kimberly asked, like working in telecom industry.
Oh yeah.
Yep, our customers are Huawei, ZTE, Fiberphone, that sort of companies in the east, and then in the west it's more like Alcatel or that sort of, yeah, that sort of companies. So inside the internally, the view held is that like these changes are quite happening at a few tiers down, and then we're more sort of like sensitive to the changes in the technology that we are on. Like say we are having this long haul backhaul networks. Like the technology is there. We're more exposed to the changes in that technology rather than the changes in the delivery technology of these things. Is it the right view to have, or do you reckon that? So basically, inside the organization, the view is this industry X sort of like the changes are quite immune from that. That's the basic thinking. Do you think that's the right thinking, or?
I'm not sure whether I completely understand your question. Is your question more around the difference between what I'm talking about in terms of experiences and moving away from just products to experiences compared to the changes that are happening now, for example, where we're moving from 4G to 5G?
Yes. So basically, what I'm asking is, because this experiential changes, the service delivery stuff is happening at a few tiers further down from these technological companies. So they feel that like they're not exposed to these changes.
I don't agree with that, and I'll tell you why. This is a topic I know a lot about because I've been working with.
Yeah, I know. I saw it in the videos that you mentioned that you're working with Huawei and other companies.
Yeah, and so we've done a lot of work in that space, and it's funny because they actually embrace this whole concept of Industry X.0, and we don't call it Industry X.0, but we call it it's all about the customer experience.
Yeah.
And in the past, some of them have been very good at producing very low-cost components and competing based on low cost, right? And there's still a market for that because there are still some very sophisticated telecommunications companies out there that have a high degree of capability around network engineering and around operating and running their networks that know exactly what they want, and so they can go and place an order and order whatever they need to improve or enhance or expand their network. But even then, they want to be able to do that in a way that is more B2C-like, right? So their network engineers want to be able to go online or on an app and browse a catalog and be able to place an order with a network equipment provider and be able to track it and trace it and be able to have social media style communication and be able to provide feedback and say it didn't work for us or whatever it was, or it came late. And so even there we see this change to this whole experience-based consumption, right, of products. But at the same time, they need to also think about the customers that are completely unknown or that have no capability in the space, and say, for example, come and build, a whole 4G network in Dubai. It's a company just putting up money and going, okay, you guys build it, right? And then that requires a very different approach, obviously, because this then is, working with online design with their executives on what does the network need to deliver, specifying it, building it, and that's also all got to be easy to do business with, right? So how do you seamlessly move from a design to a quotation, to a firm order, to a manufacturing order, to a distribution order, to then an invoice, and a final inspection and handover, and then a payment, right? And think about that in a world where you're probably consuming hundreds of thousands of SKUs to build a network, where you're dealing with multiple parties across the chain, just from a technology point of view, to make that happen seamlessly without tying up, thousands of people in the back office to make that happen, is no mean feat, right? That is very, very complicated. But it's focusing on the experience of the business-to-business customer and making that an easier process where they have full view of what's happening. It happens at pace, without lengthy delays and etc. With the efficiencies in the background that have it all automated. That's the challenge, right? And so they certainly are thinking about that. I'm working on this very actively. Yeah.
Thank you.
So sort of connected to that, Olaf, during the week I was listening to the ABC's PM program, I was driving home from work, and they were talking about a report. It sounds a little bit like talking about the NBN network in some ways. They were referring to a report that had been released by the government talking about internet speeds and capacity in the network. I can't remember the exact figures, but it made me wonder whether we here in Australia are building sufficient infrastructure that will enable our companies to compete in Industry X.0, and if not, I don't know if you have any views about what we should be doing so that we can remain internationally competitive.
Yeah, it's a loaded question, obviously, and it was funny because.
And I'm glad you're here, by the way, because I sent that question to no one, and I'd like to know the answer.
No, it's actually it's very topical. I was in the office on Friday morning with our team that specialises in the telecommunications industry, and we had a network engineer from Telstra with us, and we're talking about the future and their introduction of 5G that's going to be imminent, and the speeds that you can get. And then obviously the loaded question was, the same, which is, is the NBN a white elephant, right? Because the speed that 5G will be able to achieve is probably going to surpass at some points the current version of the NBN. So I think, my sort of view on that is the consumer pool or the business pool will provide the necessary impetus for whether it's Telstra or NBN or Optus or Virgin or whoever it is, to build what we need. Wireless will certainly play a big role. Now, certainly when you think about the Internet of Things and how many devices are going to be connected to the Internet, but it's just a cost play, right? Because wireless is probably about 5 times more expensive than fixed. So if you can hardwire something in, you're going to be better off doing it than putting a SIM card in. But then what's really interesting is if you think, for example, about the companies that are thinking about it from a consumer experience point of view, right? So if I'm Samsung or Miele and I make washing machines and I'm selling them to consumers, then the choice you have is, do you want the data, right? Because you want a better customer experience. You want to be able to tell that consumer, hey, we've had data and you're going to have a breakdown, or we need to replace this part. But at the same time, the customer experience, of a 75-year-old woman who lives alone, installing a Miele and connecting it to her Wi-Fi, and then logging in to some website and then registering with Miele. Can you just imagine? That is just not going to happen, right? Even for digitally native people, it's already hard enough, and just the sheer amount of effort is just often it's not even bother registering. You know what I mean? So their choice then is, okay, I'm going to put in a SIM card. I'm going to work with Telstra. I'm going to put in a SIM card. I know who's it sold to. I've got your details, and I monitor what you do. Right? It's going to cost more, but ultimately, I'm going to know that I'm going to be able to actually interact. Right? So it's this sort of trends that I think will just create the demand, and therefore the supply will come.
Good evening, Ola.
Hi.
My name is Abhishek. My question is that what are the competitive offerings of Accenture's Industry X.2 compared to other major players in the market? And also, when you take up a implementation project with a company, I would like to know the scope of work in detail. And secondly, what are the performance metrics that you use to quantify the ROI for the company?
For the project.
For any company, when you take up an implementation project.
Yeah, it's sort of it's a very broad question, and there's no one answer to it because our projects vary from 4-week engagements to do a quick assessment to 5-year programs with 2,000 people changing their entire core banking systems or what have you. So I can't answer that in that way, but I can give you some examples of what we typically can and like to do. So without sort of doing a big advertising for Accenture, just we have a number of divisions from strategy, which I'm part of, through to consulting, which does the implementation work around process and change and organization, to technology, to our whole digital business, where we do a lot of work around customer experience with Fjord and Interactive and subsidiaries like that, to our analytics business, where we now employ 3,000 data scientists, through to our outsourcing business, where we do a lot of operations, process outsourcing for a lot of our clients. So our dream project is where we go and work with the client to solve the business problem, like I do. I'm a strategist. I come in and work out, okay, how do we help you to improve your operational capability? I typically start with the customer in mind and focus on delivering that better customer experience. And so it's defining that, and then it's working backwards then to say, okay, well, what does that look like? What do you need? And this is what I call it. The top half of the page is from engaging with the customer through to them placing an order, getting a product or a service delivered, the way that they consume it, the way that they then potentially get it serviced, through to the retirement of that product and potentially replacement. So that's the whole sort of customer experience. But then the bottom half of the page for me is, what do you need as a business to be able to deliver that experience? What capabilities do you need? And that's both then technology capabilities as well as physical capabilities. And which ones do you own versus which ones do you have other companies involved with? Because the days of vertical integration and everything yourself they're gone. It takes too long. It costs too much. No one does it anymore. Right? We all build ecosystems to deliver customer experiences. So that's sort of where we typically like to play, and because we have the capability to do the technology and to make it happen is key. And the ROI typically gets measured in very hard dollars return on investment. Right? I spent $10 million on building this capability, and ultimately it's going to generate me another $100 million in profit or $50 million in profit. Sometimes there is no business case. You have to do it. Cybersecurity, what's the business case for cybersecurity? Right? there is no guaranteed return, but you know if you don't do it, you'll probably end up on the front page of all the media at some stage with a big lawsuit on the doorstep, right? So yeah, some of these things are just cost of doing business, and others are particularly focused about the business outcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other question? Hi, I'm Amanda.
Hi.
I work in banking and financial services, and I really like Kimberly's question before, because that was on my mind too, about working in these large banks and financial services companies that are really old and have a huge amount of market share.
Yeah.
But you can kind of see you're on the tipping point of maturity / entering decline, just given the competition.
Yeah.
Part of our group assignment, we're talking about outsourcing, which you just kind of alluded to, and some of the disadvantages of that.
Yeah.
Speaking from experience, it's great because it saves money, but then there's some issues that come as part of outsourcing, particularly when you're in another country, different culture and processes and language involved. I was looking at ANZ, and they've recently started to invest a huge amount of money in bringing outsourcing back into the business. How do you see that playing out in the future for other banks and financial services?
Yeah, look, very good question, and obviously the big banks here have some additional complications around that sustainability aspect of what I call, right, which is they're making $10 billion profit, but at the same time they're slashing thousands of jobs and sending them overseas, right? So a lot of Australian companies are facing that dilemma. What you've got to see with outsourcing is if you're doing it just for cost reasons, you're doing it for the wrong reasons, right? The labour arbitrage was a factor probably 10 years ago, but now I would recommend everybody to think about outsourcing as a way to complement capabilities that you don't have. Sometimes when it's very transactional and it's very repetitive work, etc. There's going to be even a change in terms of robotics, RPA, right? Because of a lot of that work that currently is being done in low labour countries by just much cheaper labour, because it is so repetitive, it can and it will be automated, right? So we're seeing a shift even there in terms of some of those institutions using more nearshore centres and using robotics process automation to look at some of that. And the outsourcing, as what was called then, is moved to robotics and those things. But areas where the capability doesn't exist, or where it's going to take you too long to build it up or to increase, that's where I see a lot of potential. And when we work with big banks or small financial institutions on those areas, it's typically them tapping into certain areas of capability that they don't have, right? So, I just mentioned we've got now 3,000 data scientists, right? So that level of depth and then deep analytical capability to solve common problems that banks across the world have, are things that you want to tap into, right? And then the model is also often changing to a point where it becomes a service as opposed to a long-term, big, complicated contract where things are as a service and you pay for them as you consume them, as opposed to some sort of complicated, big financial commitment.
No, I can ask one more question. You're the boss.
No, not yet. Who would like to who's done? Sarita?
Hi, Love. I just have one question. For a smaller companies which are just coming up, for a startup or sort of companies, so their primary goal will be to build on their core, invest in their core. So where they should strike the balance between developing their core and to invest in the digital transformation of their business?
When you say they're startups, are they traditional startups or are they digital startups?
No, non-digital startups.
Yeah. Well, the great advantage they have is that they probably don't have a legacy core, right? So whatever they do should be digitally agile, right? So do not go off and invest a lot of money into building industrialized core processes that are heavily supported by technology, because that's what you don't do. But you have much more agile technologies that will that you're able to adapt and change very rapidly. There's a lot of modern technology now that you can change interfaces and the way that you conduct transactions with clicks yourself. You don't need to go into source code and change the way that the program is being run. It's about tapping into those sorts of technologies that are very fungible at low cost, right? Because Amazon still uses an ERP, right? It's not like they don't have SAP or anything like that, but it's like deep down in the core, right? Then they build all these applications on top and all these layers where people can access easily data, and then build applications on top of that that are very very configurable and very easy to use. But it's not to say that there is no sort of, core master data and transaction management, right? But I would certainly make sure that you're in that sort of layer of applications that are very agile and fungible, and don't set up an IT department because the worst enemy of companies, traditional companies, is having an IT department, because IT is the business and the business is IT. You know what I mean? It's people need to get that cultural shift, because when I'm a business user and I go and this is what I want the system to do, and now you go, Mr. IT, and go and make it happen, it's too late. It's gone. It's wrong. So.
I've been having this discussion throughout several interactions about sustainability. Every time we mention sustainability and automation, and things are becoming requiring less labor, less things. Now the population of the planet went from 2.5 billion to 7.5 billion past 70 years. And as they say, internet it will end poverty, it will create jobs, but with the massive cities and everyone moving from the outside and the percentage of unemployment increasing, where is that leading the planet? And after a while, the concentration of wealth also, like there was a report about 42 people in the world own more wealth than 50% of the planet. So with that concentration, where is the sustainability, and who's going to buy products or services in the wealth? And the Republican narrative of trickle-down economics is just a scam. Nothing.
Yeah, look, I guess it's a concern some people have. I see it very different. We do fair bit of work pro bono with, for example, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and there's actually a lot of good things that have been achieved over the last few years in terms of lifting absolute poverty and taking people from below the minimum poverty line. I don't have the stats in my head, but I was had a discussion about it last week. But there are a huge amount of positive changes that are happening towards eradication of that. I think a great example of a huge country, China, right? More than a billion population. 15, 20 years ago, most of the people were, definitely below, the middle class income levels. These days, the middle class in China is the biggest in the world, right? I think it's surpassed the US now in terms of people with disposable income of more than 50,000 US, but it's the biggest. You know what I mean? It's like, and a lot of that has to do with China's capabilities around export and manufacturing and technology. I mean, there's a lot of new technology coming out of China.
But China also has some leftover social programs that will contribute to the redistribution of wealth.
Yes.
The states, they don't have similar things. What other countries, they don't have it. States have tax cut from 35% corporate tax to 41%, I think, through additional contribution to to the other side. Again, it's worrying.
Yeah.
Ari from Business Treasury. So a lot of the stuff we're talking about, pretty much what companies actually right into right now, we're sort of looking at it. So like all these consumer products talking to us, provide servicing information, operation data, all that sort of stuff. The problem that I'm finding though is, what are some of the question I have for you, and relating to my case, is how do, when we present this to our directors in the company and all this sort of thing, they're basically saying we have a budget of X to work with for this year, and all these existing financial models. It doesn't quite fit within that, but the capability that you can open later is huge. But so the question is, what techniques can you use to basically push it through management? This is it might not be a question you can answer specifically.
You can hire me, and then I can help the management team to align the path, and we can go and find another job. Because no, but in all honesty, Amazon, right? I mean, everybody talks about it, but it is true. So Jeff Bezos said, 15 years ago, when he was challenged on his profit, he said, look, to his investors, you can invest in this company, but we're not going to make any money for a long, long time. And so, it takes a lot of vision, and it takes a lot of inspiration from somebody like that to create a company that it is now. Right? And it will continue to grow and capture market share because it's a commodity play, and the more scale I've got, the lower my cost will be, and the more I will be able to pass back to the consumers. And so if I make 2% of $1 trillion, then it's still very lot of money, right? Instead of making 10% out of $100 billion. So there is no, I guess, silver bullet, but I face these challenges a lot, where somebody in an executive team or on the board will share that vision, will feel that the company's not pivoting fast enough, right? But the others don't. And so, often, consultants are a way to try and bring some external insights into what's happening and do some comparisons. But, that's what I would have to say about that.
Well, I have a question, and maybe because I'm the lecturer in this thing, I can have a double-barreled question.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so my question is this. You talk about you being in strategy, and of course, related to supply chain and operations, right? So if you could just relate to us how that strategy side, or what your concentration of the strategy is, and in the consulting way, how is that related to everything else that has to happen in a particular project? And I think many of you are interested in consulting. So in the case of the strategy side, how is that related to everything else that has to happen within a particular project? So that's my first question. And the second one is, and also related to that, is the subject that we have right now is operations management. Is that relevant at all? And maybe the actual term might be wrong. Maybe we shouldn't be calling it operations management, right? So hopefully that'll be a question which is on some of the tips of your tongues, all right? Because some of them a lot of them are forced to do the subject, right? Whether they enjoy it or not is another thing.
Two very, very good questions, right? And I actually started off in sales and marketing. I My first job out of uni was a junior product marketeer, and I just found it to be completely. Well, when I learned, I learned about the 4 Ps. That's all I. And I found, when I actually then came to be a junior product marketeer, there was only actually, maybe 1 P I could control, which was promotions. Because price was set, the product was set, and the place where we sold it was set, right? So, I didn't spend, 4 years to, what it did do, it gave me a very good understanding of, the consumer and satisfying customer expectations. And so, I've worked with some leaders in the field of supply chain, with Dr. John Gatorna, with Professor Martin Christopher from Cranfield, what we've always done is we've designed operations back from understanding customer propositions. And you have to have a vision and a view of where that's going. And quite often I've found, using my strategy hat and my ability as a strategist, to paint a picture of the future, into your point there about Mitsubishi, and say, well, I don't care whether you're sales or marketing or whether you're finance or operations, but as a company, this is what's going to happen in the future. This is what we're seeing in your industry happening. This is what your competitors are doing. This is what digital threat is coming your way now these days. That requires you to rethink the way that you're currently offering products and services to your customer, right? And so it's then understanding that first before starting to build an operation that can deliver against the promise. Because if I start looking at what my competitors are doing, by the time that I've copied and built it, they've moved on. It takes 3 to 5 years in big companies, and I mainly work with big companies to do this, right? And digital comes in, and it happens within 3 months, right? I hate so bad about my clients, but I had a meeting last week with the chief supply chain officer of a big global FMCG company, and they asked me to come and talk to them about digital, and they're doing big digital transformation. And we spent nearly 2 hours talking about blockchain and IoT and cloud and analytics and everything that companies like that should be thinking about. But ultimately, I asked them, I said, what is your vision as a company? Where are you going to be in 3 to 5 years' time? And what is your major competitive differentiation from a customer experience point of view in the B2B and in the B2C space? Right? And, we just laughed because we didn't have an answer. And I said, well, then I can't help you to work out what you need to digitally transform, because I don't even know what I'm meant to be delivering in 3 to 5 years' time. And I said, come back to me or talk to my colleagues and we'll help you to create the vision. He said, I'm just a supply chain guy. I said, well, then you can still do that by painting. I've done this where, we've gone off and initiated this out of the operations group and said the customer experience is going to look like this. Has everybody agreed? Oh, wow, this is amazing. Yeah. Well, shouldn't you be doing that as a strategist or as a marketeer? And it's then from there on to work backwards, because then you have a view of how you're going to use blockchain. What do you want to achieve with it, right? What is it going to deliver in the future? So I think that is around, strategy and operations. And should it be called operations? It is not very sexy. It doesn't sound very, very, cool, all that. But it is at the core of what companies do. And, Amazon is an operations business with a very smart digital front end, right? And their core competency is to get products to you cheaper and quicker and with a better experience than anybody else, right? And that's a cool company. So should it be called operations? if you come up with a better name, let me know, because I'll change my part of the business and call it something cool, you know.
Okay, so Bjorn, you've done your dash. Who's dying to ask a question who has never been asked and never asked before? Yeah, you've got one and Sunny, and that'll be it, all right? Yeah, okay, and then the rest of you, you can besiege poor Olaf after this, all right? And then let's see.
Hopefully this is an interesting one. I'm Jessica, I'm from Woolworths.
Yes,
It's usually, we talk about Amazon as being one of those companies that's the face for digitisation in Industry Expo. Is there an example of a company we might not expect who's kind of leading the groundswell on this topic? So an industry maybe we don't think can associate with digital?
So are you asking an example of a company that is a very good example of digital native outside of Amazon?
Yeah, or something, I mean, thinking of really left field, like agriculture. Is there someone in agriculture just changing the game that we wouldn't realise?
Yeah, no, there is. You know, and I'll come back to your company at the end of this. But you know, agriculture. But agriculture is a good example of where there is a huge revolution going on. And unless any of you are in agriculture, you would have no idea, because digital is changing the way completely how agriculture is done. Because now we have the Internet of Things, and we implement sensors into pastures and meadows, and we measure, you know, moisture content and chemical composition, and it's sending samples live back to a managed agricultural platform. We have drones flying above pastures, comparing the height of different crops in similar areas, and going, yours is growing faster than yours. What's happening? Right? So it is leveraging all that data, visual, hard measurements, to then work out what should you be doing in terms of agricultural treatment. More water, more fertilizer, different fertilizer, you name it, but anything that you can do to get your crop utilization to the highest as possible. So yeah, it's absolutely happening as we speak. In milk production, complete digital milk farms. I've been in one. It was about 3 or 4 months ago. There is no single person working there. The cows know exactly where to go, and when they need to be milked, they'll go up to the machine, and the machine will, with laser lights, find out the others, and it will attach the teats and you know, wash it and suck out the milk, and the cow will, you know, be cleaned, the udder, and then it will move out. And there's machines on the ground cleaning up after the cows, and there's automatic feeders. It is totally beyond, you know, belief that it doesn't require a farmer anymore. It requires a technologist and a biologist to, you know, measure what the cows need to eat and the quality of their milk to be able to adjust the feeding. And then it requires a bunch of engineers to keep the machines running. But otherwise, the concept of the farmer is, you know, is going out the window, right? So that's a good one. And then in relation to your company, it was your CEO who came out the other week and said, well, you know, Amazon is actually, Aldi is not my biggest threat, it's actually Uber Eats, right? Because we're all competing for the family dinner. And I completely agree that, I mean, you might have sort of, you know, pushed the boundary there a bit, but yeah, digital entrance coming into the consumers ever, you know, more busy, less time, you know, time poor family, right? And they want convenience, and you know, that certainly delivers that. Yeah.
Okay, Olaf, I think we have to end it there. Sorry, Sunny, but maybe we can catch him after this. I'll just stand up here. So I won't feel an inferiority complex. Thank you so much for this evening. I think, yeah, and I think it was great to hear your personal experiences as well as the examples that you gave of industry and some sort of encouragement to me about teaching operations management and how we can give it a more sexy look. So thanks again and
Thank you for having me.
great. Okay, so what I'd like us to do is to have a break, come back by 7:30 if you can. And if anybody, would you mind if some of them?
I'll questions?
Yeah, if so some of you would like to ask or have some questions, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you again.